building is a prop or it's a piece of equipment. Same thing that's happening with them on that parking lot. And I'll reiterate what they had said earlier. That building has been there for a very, very long time. It was a noisy garage and a gas station for a long time. It's been a restaurant for years and years and years. No one had a problem with it. And now if there is a problem, and I think if the people who are complaining are wanting a very quiet, peaceful place, they should think about selling the property and moving into the country where it's nice and quiet, because it is what it is. And when one person starts putting complaints in that affect businesses all the way around, we are all going to stand up and say no. So I'm asking the board to please consider the fact that they throw out this petty and ridiculous complaint and move along so that we can get back to our businesses. We're busy people, and we're trying to keep this town as healthy and as happy and as strong a community as it could possibly be. And this does not support the community at all. It's a personal vendetta, and I'd like to see it over. Thank you.
Thanks, Mimi. Any other members of the public?
Will Harper, Mill Street, three doors down from the affected property. I'd just like to say, as a business owner, businesses evolve. You know, like when the Mittens submitted their site plan, they didn't have a wood-fired pizza oven in their site plan. The Union didn't have their wood-fired kitchen in the back that's on a truck. That wasn't in their site plan. When I opened my business, I didn't have a site plan. I never submitted anything. Greg said, just go ahead. But evolution in business is necessary for survival. And when things come along, like events or opportunities that are temporary and are not a permanent structure, not a permanent part of the business, they need to be able to take advantage of them and do what they can to survive. The violation, well, one thing that I'd like to point out is in Ross's letter, the village attorney, if this is just about them forgetting something in the site plan, saying, oh, by the way, we were going to do these other uses, we didn't know we had to tell you that because the planning commission never asked them, they can go back and resubmit their site plan to the planning commission. All they need is a yes or down, up or down vote from the planning commission. They don't need a variance. That's according to our village attorney. That would solve this whole thing right now. Also, in terms of the violation, it was written specifically about Section 5. And then now we're hearing a little bit, well, if the site plan isn't compliant, then it's a zoning ordinance, then it's a zoning violation, even though that was never mentioned in the violation. It's kind of like going to court for broken taillight, and the judge says, well, I think you were speeding. And, you know, the ticket's for the broken taillight, but I'm going to give you a speeding ticket instead. That would be the equivalent to what that, you know, deciding this on that would be. And then what you really need to decide is the interpretation, which means the intention of Section 5. And Section 5 relates only to prescribed parking areas and the buffer required. There is no prescribed parking area. The Planning Commission could have prescribed a parking area. They didn't. Sorry. When they, I'm going to take a little time for that disruption. When they didn't prescribe a parking area, they waived their right to demand a buffer, because without a prescribed parking area, you can't demand a buffer. So that was all waived by the Planning Commission in effect. So it would be totally unfair to come back and make a buffer on something that they had a chance to do. They didn't do it. So Article 5 is totally irrelevant, in my opinion, to this whole thing, because it's about something that was waived by the PC. You guys as a board, you have all the tools and reasoning in front of you to do the right thing here today. Nobody's going to say you made a wrong decision or a decision contrary to law if you do what's best for the community, and if you listen to all of the neighbors and the surrounding business owners that want things to stay the way they are, and not to listen to the minority who obviously has some kind of a personal problem with this. And I hope you do a good job. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Yes.
So I just want to say, Peter and I live right next door. We are so excited that they are there. We live between Mimi and Joel and these wonderful people right here who employed my grandson this summer, so it was a great joy. We love the smells of the food truck. We love the people that are in the food truck. We love all the events they do. We feel blessed to be able to sit on our front porch and enjoy all the comings and goings of the happy people from the weddings or from the wonderful outside area all summer. People are so happy. I just don't know why we have to have anger in all of this. I mean, if something bothers you a little bit, too bad. I mean, we live here, we're a community, we have businesses, we need, we need to support each other. I mean, if anybody's gonna be bothered, we are, and we are joyous. It is a wonderful addition to our community. And, if some little thing bothers you, so what? We're gonna bother each other, but we need to get along. Sit on each other's front porches, laugh together, have fun. And go enjoy the great food. The food truck is terrific. We eat there, like 3 times a week all summer. So I just like to say we are not bothered in the least. We are joyous.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Are we considered what?
Yes.
Yes.
We
Yes.
have a select time for,
The 5 minutes.
okay. All of that is wonderful, and I want to repeat what Patrick said at the initial meeting back in 2021. He said, and by the way, we lived in.
Yep,
I'm
public
sorry.
comment to the board, sorry.
And name.
We lived right across the street from Zingerman, so we're not strangers to that kind of hubbub. And at the conclusion of the meeting with, in 2021, we had what I would consider an agreement where Laura Cavendish was there, other members were there, I think you were there, Jamie Gale. I'm not sure if you were there, Susan, but the agreement was, we examined a site plan that talked about an Airstream. And the Airstream was included in the original packet that we were handed by Laura Cavendish just 2 hours before the meeting. And it looked like this. And in conversations with Sean, she said, we're waiting to hear where the village would like us to put this Airstream.
No, stop. Allow them to make their comments.
Sorry, but.
I'm just letting them know that.
Okay, yeah. All right, anyway, so this Airstream is stationary. It was put in the front yard. It was all part of the plan. It doesn't have a motor on top. And the discussion was, what do you think about the sandbox? All those things were discussed. Not a second food truck, not a second food court. In fact, the site plan that we saw, which was not included in the packet for the public, describes this as an outdoor seating area. That was all agreed upon. The key issue here is none of this, actually. It has to do with the zoning. You have a zoning map right over there. I make copies of the zoning, but it's not.
That's
not accurate.
Okay.
Sure.
So here's a copy that is on your website. I brought copies for everyone. Here's a close-up. And I just want to draw your attention to the pink color. Pink represents CR1. Commercial, residential. Your master plan and all of the publications, documents that you have talk about compatibility. And so I'm asking you, where's the compatibility between commercial and residential? Is it by your definition? Is it by my definition? You have provisions in your own ordinances that talk about screening, and it really does boil down to screening. If you would like to pass that around. I've identified the properties, and to this date, Littlebrook, our property, Sean's, Wendy's, everybody's is still considered commercial residential. So in my opinion, you should abide by those ordinances that you have published in that section of your ordinances, which call for commercial residential. Another thing that was excluded from the public packet was a survey that was completed by Nick Onan for our property, topographical survey, which indicates the real problem here. The real problem is our concrete black block wall, which, if I recall, our trustee Harper described it as the ugly gray block wall. At the array of
1 minute.
okay, anyway, so I'm gonna just get to the heart of the matter, okay. Here's the discrepancy. The boundary line clearly indicates our wall inside our property, not on any shared property. There was a document that came to light in March of this year as a result of Adam Tousley's discovery through this mess back here, referring to 2nd Street. I had not seen that correspondence between Mr. Borze and John Core and Joni Scott, which indicated that his survey should override our survey. And his survey said that our block wall was right down, the property line was right down the center of the wall. I submit to you that this was on file in the county of Leelanau in 2019, and it was ignored.
Time.
Okay, so I'll just leave you, so Patrick, you can finish up.
So, first of all, I'll ignore the ad hominem arguments, but I will remind Sean that there are laws against slander, and this is a public meeting. The issue really is for the CR1 district setback. There are required setbacks for all the areas in the CR1. The setback for Garden Lake is 30 feet. The minimum setback, which was quoted by Joni Scott, your zoning administrator, is 8 feet. Whichever one you pick, there is a setback. Setbacks are required because it makes neighbors good neighbors. Setbacks, according to your own zoning, are not to be occupied by any structure. The wall that Kay referred to, which is on the zoning now, or which is on the survey, not only do we own the wall, we own the other side of the wall. We own a foot on the other side of the wall. And we've maintained that area when it was built before their time and before a lot of people who are here now's time, by a lady by the name of Ermengarde Griffin. Ermengarde built that post and beam fence in 1975. And we built the wall in about 82. Many businesses have come and gone. The property actually has been lapsed, as many people in this room know, maybe for 3 or 4 years at a time, sometimes before the new owner took it over and tried to make a business out of it. For 40 years, I maintained that post and beam fence. And I maintained the euonymus, which was over 50 years old, and 14 feet wide and 14 feet tall on the other side of that wall. Here is a photo of me. What year is this?
This is
2017. In the foreground, if you'll note, there's a huge euonymus branch that had cut off the wall because it was beginning to push the wall over. But there I am maintaining the wall. The wall, again, we've maintained for over 40 years, and the fence we maintained for over 40 years. This is the picture of the space between the wall and the fence in euonymus. Again, Kay and I planted, groomed, cultivated, and took care of that fence and that 14-foot wide euonymus plant for 40 years. I think there's something in the law called a right, adverse possession, or whatever. Call it what you will. Nonetheless, that property, which that truck is now parked on, is my property. There's no question about that. It's not a matter of is it or is it not. It's a legal fact. They tore down that euonymus, which if you go to page 90 in your, go to page 90 in your.
Chair, 1 minute.
Okay, go to page 90 in
In Article 5.
Yeah, in Article 5.
Well, it's page 90 in your ordinances.
when they received their site plan, they were not to remove any greenery or any plant life whatsoever. Quote, no grading or removal of trees or other vegetation, land filling, or construction or improvements of any kind shall be permitted prior to site plan approval or a letter from the Secretary of the Planning Commission or the Chairman. They ripped all that out. 50 years, 40 years of maintenance. They ripped it out without any concern, paved it over, and then have told me, if you come onto the property to maintain your wall, we will call the police. If you come onto your own property, we're going to call the police. Is that right?
Time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Just scanning, anybody in Zoom? I don't think so. Okay, if no other members of the public would like to comment, we do have a couple pieces of correspondence that were included in the packet. You should have received those. One is from
Carl Wazinski.
Yep, Carl Wazinski, and the other is from some surrounding property owners, some of which are here today, some of whom are not. We've all had time to review those. Okay, so we've had our public comments and correspondence. Now we come to the questions and clarifications portion of the hearing, where board members may ask questions to the property owners, complainants, or zoning administrator for further clarification. And I would open this up and go ahead.
Ross.
Oh, or Ross, or our village attorney who's present today.
I think I heard that there are two surveys. Is that correct? There are two conflicting surveys?
No, they're not conflicting. Actually, Mr. Core judged ours to be the legitimate survey.
Sean?
When we purchased the property, there was a marker registered with the state that went right down the property line, or right down the middle of the fence. So when we purchased the property, the survey with the state marker went right down the property line. When the village representative was redoing the survey, he said Mr. Thompson had presented his own survey. And so the line was in dispute. And I asked the village surveyor, why would you take somebody else's survey when the marker's already in the ground where the landline is? And he told me, have your husband call me. Have your husband call me. And then I said, no, I would like to have an answer from you. Why do you think you would take someone with their own vested interest in survey versus what's registered with the state? And he said, well, don't worry about it. I'll give you 6 inches on another part of your line. Don't worry about it. And I said, I am worried about it because it's about the future. If it was a normal neighbor relationship, but I said, in the future, this neighbor will say, that's my side and I can come over with my body. And so he said, well, those 6 inches, nobody can fit, don't worry about it. And if you want, you can pursue this with an attorney, which we didn't. And he said also, I called your surveyor and he doesn't have, and it wasn't my surveyor, it was the surveyor of real estate. and he doesn't have time to come out, so we'll just go with the one I decide because I have that authority. And I also asked the village surveyor, will you look at the land lines also adjacent to the neighbor property? The property owner adjacent to us seems to be expanding their property line on all sides, not just on our side. It's a method of operation where you claim and grab land. And he did pull up the other survey and said it does appear that the lines are trying to be expanded on all sides of the property adjacent.
Do you know?
If I may just add, I think that it would be a separate issue that has been abandoned by the village council, the survey work. And so,
So we just don't know, but
yeah,
it seems like history
If
has,
I may,
history has
actually,
shown,
this is time for us to talk.
okay.
There are two surveys that we have, and there was a discussion about the property lines. I do know that.
Correct, and your surveyor allowed the Michigan registered marker to be taken out
Mhm.
and put his own in 6 inches over. And then we put our post right there, Kev said put it right there because in the future, someone's gonna say it's more than even 6 inches. They're gonna claim it's 12, then 18, then the whole property. So-
Sure.
So,
Though that
And it
may be a separate, I do understand that there are concerns over the
Sort of,
survey.
It sounds like historically, for a long, long, long time, this has been.
King's family has owned the property for over
Yeah,
100 years.
right.
Nick O'Nutt's grandfather and Nick.
Point of order, please. Nobody can
Actually,
do that.
just ask me a question.
I was at the.
I can give you a general overview, not in this case, but in Winona County, in the 30s, it was surveyed when the markers put in during the Depression, during the civil, CCT program through President Roosevelt. With technology now, and GPS and everything else, if you do a new survey, most parking lines in Winona County, everywhere, do not match up what was done back then. So the technology has advanced. So it's not uncommon to have disputes on where the parking line is. In Winona County and most counties, because the technology is varying so much. With the legal description and where the markers are, don't always line up. Because those people doing those markers at that time were not professional people, they were part of the force. And there was numerous errors. And the state of Michigan is actually funding counties to redo their survey states. So every year, the county allocates funds to Winona County and most counties. And a portion of all properties being resurveyed on an annual basis to hopefully resolve some of these issues, because the dispute on where the property line is very common. And I bet if you did a survey of your property now, compared to when it was done originally in the 30s and 40s, you'd have some variations. On the property that we own, my parents in Cedar, exact same things happen. The lines do change.
I just want to, in a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Keys.
no.
What's the question?
My question was about the surveys,
Yeah.
and I think it's been answered.
Well,
gotta
I'd
be
just like to
specific.
expand on that slightly because it's been kind of one-sided. Again,
Right, this
there
is
we've been
nothing to do.
Landsat
Yeah,
satellites.
We gotta move on to the task at hand.
Okay, so may I say something? I have no question, but I'm really heartbroken by this dispute. I am heartbroken by it because, again, as Mimi said, we want to live in a village that's happy and, we understand each other, we forgive each other, we compromise. And I understand everything that everyone in this room has said. I do understand the distress of Patrick and Kay, who have owned this property forever, who have been planning to build their dream home on it, and who are building their dream home, and suddenly, they knew what they were getting into, and I don't want to get into the various disputes between the parties, because those are ugly and unfortunate, and I wish some harmony could come between these two couples, because they're both living their dreams. They're both doing their dreams, And yet, they feel threatened by each other and distressed by each other, and that's just not good. I wish a mediator could come in and work with them. I do understand the distress of Kay and Patrick suddenly having something in their next door that they didn't expect, and that they did not expect from the site plan or the whole building effort. And to see, and they showed us a picture of the side of the food truck with the name on it, Taquito's, visible from their yard, that they did not expect. So, and the site plan did not indicate a driveway. It did not indicate anything parked in that space, even temporarily. I wish there could be some kind of compromise between these parties, that, I don't know, a taller wall put up to block the food truck, or the food truck moved to the street, or I don't know what. I'm not creative with those kind of solutions, but I just wish there were a way to compromise and come to some resolution here. It wasn't a question.
Board members may ask questions to the property owners, complainants, or zoning administrator for further clarification.
I got a question for Joni. This food truck, is there a difference between a temporary structure and a permanent structure in this case?
Yes, according to our zoning.
It's also not the structure. It is a recreational vehicle, is, in my opinion, how you would define this. Because a structure has to be something that's permanently attached to the ground, even if it's temporary, which the Airstream is, but the food truck is not. That's my answer to that. I have other thoughts, but I don't know if you had more questions going on with that. Okay.
And I would just like to note for the board that the site plan was submitted to the public and included in the packet, what was approved in August 2021.
And that area was just designated as exterior seating.
But it also does show that the plants would be not there. It has 2 planters on it, and it doesn't have any euonymus, and that was approved. I think, if I may, yeah. To me, I think Susan's questions and points are valid, but what they filed for is an interpretation of the zoning ordinance. And an interpretation of the zoning ordinance isn't something that says they like your food truck or they don't like your food truck. Like, that is not the purpose of an interpretation. That would be a variance or a site plan review. You can amend and file for another site plan review. That's a route that you could go. You could file for a variance and ask for that and say it needs to be there because of some hardship, and it can't go somewhere else. And so, in my opinion, when you're looking at it as an interpretation, my understanding of what that means is that we are interpreting the zoning that we are looking at in question and seeing if that is being applied appropriately to this situation. If the zoning has been interpreted wrong and there isn't setbacks or requirements for parking, then that would be applied across the board in the future going forward, because we're refining the interpretation of the zoning, is my understanding. In fact, Planning Commission would then need to look. Correct? Am I correct? That's an interpretation we're looking at. Because when you look at the Zoning Board of Appeals handbook from Michigan Municipal League, I believe, it's that unlikely opinions or recommendations of consultants, an interpretation by the ZBA establishes the meaning of the matter being interpreted and is deemed to be that actual meaning of the ordinance from that point forward, unless the ZBA's interpretation is appealed to the courts. And so that's my understanding as to what we're looking at, not other factors and other considerations and other issues here. Like I said, do not think that it is a structure. I think in the past, some food trucks have been considered structures, but I don't think that that's accurate. I think, and we have talked a lot in planning about the definition of recreational vehicle and expanding that so that it doesn't just say and other vehicles on wheels. But in this situation, we have what we have, which when you look at recreation vehicles and the definition for that, it's temporary, it's on wheels, it can be towed, hauled, or driven. I mean, those are the things that we're looking at. And when you're storing a recreation vehicle, you need to provide that such vehicle is parked in the side or rear yard, which in this situation, it's a corner lot. So we have two fronts, we have a side and a rear. Right now, our zoning says the rear is determined by the homeowner. I assume that this is not a rear side, correct? So the storage of recreational vehicles is to the side or rear yard, that it not be used as living quarters, and so it's located not to create a nuisance to neighborhood use. In my opinion, if you're looking at parking, it's not a parking space for public use, it's not a parking space for employees. However, there is a recreational vehicle parked there and there is a driveway going into it. All of those things have definitions and process if you're going to do it. It's not that I want to say you can't do those, but if you're going to do those things, it should be a use that's outlined. If you have special use, which you guys have, restaurant, tavern isn't something that is a use by right in CR1, but you have a special use. If you're going to expand that use, you have to ask for that. Just because other people haven't asked for it doesn't necessarily mean that nobody should have to, as some of the public comment has said. And it wasn't on the original site plan. It could have been, right? I mean, and people would have looked at it and there would have been things under general provisions that would have been asked, like the buffering, like the sight lines, noise. That's something that could have been considered and waived or could be going forward if you were to ask for those same process to go through. I don't want people to interpret my thoughts as me being anti-business for Northport, because I'm definitely not that. I hope that people understand that, especially with the things that I have gone through with zoning in this village. But I do think that there is a process, and what you filed for is an interpretation today. And to me, the zoning ordinance absolutely shows that if you are parking something, that there should be a setback. And if you're not, then you need to ask for that. And it's a storage of a vehicle with a driveway that appeared without a driveway permit, correct? Is there a driveway permit?
That's correct.
Yeah. So it's not that I'm trying to be anti-business. I just feel like there is a process, and what you filed today isn't a process that allows us to say you can have this parked there, because it's not, you're not asking for a variance right now. You're asking for an interpretation.
Laura really summarized my thoughts as well. I want this business to be successful, but everybody has to play by the set of rules that we have. And it's a motorized vehicle that comes and goes from a driveway and is parked. And I wish there were, I don't think there is another interpretation, but there is a remedy. But I don't see this.
Well, because to me, we don't want to say that for parking, there is no longer setbacks. If it's abutting a residential, I assume this is a residential
Yes.
adjoining. This is going to be a full-time residence. It's not completed. It's not going to have anything commercial at any
No.
time ever. No, it's commercial.
Commercial
It's zoned.
She's
She has a
saying
problem
you're,
hearing.
yeah, my question was that what you are building is a single-family home, and it
Yes.
is not intended to have any commercial business in that location.
It's going to be an art gallery.
It's our home here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
our
okay.
home, but
It's gonna be a
Okay,
big
that's all
gallery.
you said.
I'm confused.
Gallery.
There's an art gallery.
Gallery.
It's
No,
gonna be a
no, no,
business.
there's a studio.
We're both
Does it-
artists, we're both Cranbrook graduates, we have a studio, and
Is the studio gonna be open to the public for
No.
sale?
no, not business hours. Will people come and look at our artwork? I hope so.
But not just generally open to the public with
No.
hours?
Never intended to be that.
Does it matter?
It does matter
Yes.
immensely, because if it is, so when you look to the buffering between properties, when you look to the buffering between properties, it is very critically important because there's 3 different classes, and single-family home is class 1, and class 3 is retail establishments. If you are going between a restaurant and a retail business, absolutely no buffering is required. And if you are between a single-family home and a restaurant, then you do require buffering of a wall and deciduous bushes, or a certain amount of distance, you know, with different growth in there. So it is significantly important, and because it's unfinished, that's why I had that question, so.
Is there any public opportunity for comment? No.
We're in our questions and clarifications still, or are we moved on to deliberation?
Or questions and clarifications.
Okay, just making sure.
So, no, all right.
You can't, you can't.
Yeah,
We don't want this to become a free-for-all, that's why we have the
Right.
rules.
But you're affecting us now too.
Lots of people want to talk.
This
but-
is,
Yeah,
everything you're saying affects Willowbrook Mill as well. My catering trucks in my driveway. All of that.
We're not talking about Willowbrook, we're
Yeah.
talking about Yard.
I know you, but you're making a decision that affects everybody.
So if there's a
Not
studio.
true.
stop. Point of order. Let's bring this back in right now. We're in questions and clarifications, please.
I think maybe we can ask our attorney to clarify a decision made today. It sets an interpretation of the ordinance, but it's not retroactive. It doesn't apply to all of the other businesses.
So it's hard to answer that because presumably some of those other businesses have different approvals. So this particular interpretation, I very much appreciate the way Ms. Cavendish characterized it, because it is supposed to be a very narrow issue, right? That we look at. Does Article 5 here apply? And part of my communication was that you also want to look at the site plan, because that's also a binding requirement on this property. To the extent other businesses have different site plan approvals or special PUDs, whatever it is, those will control for those properties. This interpretation, though, as suggested in the MML materials, your interpretation on this issue would then be potentially usable in other deliberations that you have or in other interpretations of the zoning ordinance, but it wouldn't be, I guess, sort of unilaterally just applied then across the board to all of the places and give Ms. Scott the basis to start issuing zoning violations out the wazoo. Like that's not how that is designed to operate.
Going forward.
Right, but it would apply, but it would be it would be an interpretation that is binding on the future interpretation. So that's why it's also very important to maintain that narrow scope, because you don't want to start interpreting more broadly than is necessary in this instance.
But do you, Ross, do you believe that, is it Ross or Ross?
Yes, Ross, yeah.
Ross. I'm sorry, do you believe that Article 5 does pertain to this situation?
I think Article 5 applies to the extent it applies throughout the village. And when there's a site plan review process, that alters the applicability, right? The planning commission has the ability, as it considers that site plan review, to modify different requirements or to give allowances for things that are somewhat outside of the zoning ordinance. Without that site plan review, Article 5 would apply, right? Because it's just a generally applicable ordinance with respect to parking. I think the key here is that there's some communities have food truck ordinances. We don't have a food truck ordinance, and there's no specific definition of parking area. So when you start to try to apply where these facts to the zoning ordinance, I mean, I understand why they're asking for interpretation because it's not clear through the operation of the ordinance how that should work. So that's your all's task is to sort of determine, based on that ambiguity, how you should apply zoning ordinance in this instance.
Barb, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just was listening to the conversations here, and what you were saying, Laura, really applies to these recreational vehicles, but not necessarily to this parking area, which was not envisioned in the beginning when the site plan was reviewed. The parking area, or the Article 5 refers to parking for the business, for employees as well as customers. And that doesn't seem to apply to this situation.
How would you respond to that?
So based on what I understand, it doesn't, no, I agree, I don't think it is used in that way at all. So there's an extent to which, right, that's not, a food truck is different from an Airstream trailer, is different from an employee parking, right? There's a gradation here, in my mind. And so when the site plan review process went forward and they contemplated an immovable trailer serving as a bar or something along those lines in that location or in a nearby location, I could see the planning commission having a set of considerations and discussions about that issue. I think if that at the time was a movable food truck, I think they probably would have had different considerations and would have had different thoughts and maybe had different questions for the proprietors of the business. They may still have approved it anyway. Could be approved as a subsequent, reapplication or request for a variance. There's different ways to handle that, but in my mind, it's not a direct fit within the ordinance. As you say, it's not being used for employee parking. So, but as Ms. Cavendish said, there's a vehicle that's parked in an open space that's accessible by a driveway. So when you try to interpret portions of it, you can see where it comes. So, it's ultimately it's your call how you wish to interpret that, which portions you're going to decide control over this entire situation, and that's where the interpretation then becomes
There is a definition of a parking area in our zoning. An off-street open area, the principal use of which is for the parking of automobiles, whether for compensation or not, as an accommodation to clients, customers, visitors, or employees. Parking area shall include access drives within the actual parking area.
The key words are maybe principal use, whose principal use is to park a vehicle, and I'm not sure that's the principal use.
Of a restaurant?
Of that spot at Garden Lake. It's not there all the time. It's not there most of the time.
It's there most of the time.
No, 83 days a year.
How many days?
83.
It's been there since.
Okay, let's
July
stop
4th.
the back and forth.
Limited hours.
Is it possible in a situation like this to suggest, well, no, let me rephrase that. Let me ask Sean and Kevin, are you willing to go back to the planning commission and seek a change, seek a variance?
They're not the same thing. A site plan review, an amendment to the site plan review is different than a variance.
Oh, see, okay. An amendment to the site plan review, are you willing to do that?
I think we would be interested to hear the interpretation that the board has today. And once we have that interpretation, we'll consider the next step.
And it always was our intention to have a mixed-use space on the whole facility, whether it's music, musicians setting up, weddings, pop-up dinners, art installations. So
Are we
it's a
gonna get another
revolving.
complaint if we set a tent up for reception? Yeah, are we gonna get another complaint?
We had a complaint about stringing lights. They won't stop.
Yeah, I mean, a temporary structure, a tent does need a permit.
It does.
And it also needs a permit with the county. They have temporary use permits that are required for tents that are over 10 by 10. So, and I believe, yeah, for commercial use, not for private use. So.
Just to say, the village attorney for a second, to the extent that there are certain allowable uses that you want on that property. From the village's perspective, from an enforcement perspective, it's a lot easier if those are, all allowable uses are spelled out, all intended uses are spelled out. So to the extent that there are uses that you intend to undertake on the property that are not included in there, then it would be ripe for a site plan amendment to the extent that you'd like to include those going forward.
Or an expansion of the special use, because you could file for an expansion of your special use also to include all of the uses that you would consider. However, if you were putting up a tent, you would still need to file a temporary permit for that, which is $25 here, and then at the county, I believe it's $155. But that requires an inspection by the fire chief and a number of other things.
I just want to get a caveat. I'm speaking as village attorney, I'm not your attorney, so I don't want to give you legal advice, but I'm saying from village's perspective, from an enforcement perspective, it's going to be easier for Joni to understand, what is allowable and what your intention is, so that if a complaint comes in, well, look, this is approved or not approved, and you go on that basis.
I have another question for both parties here. Regardless of what we decide here, are the two of you willing to meet with a mediator at, say, some donor's expense to try to resolve your issues? I'm not looking for speeches. I'm looking for a yes or a no.
Okay, well, I'd like to expand on that. The personal comments to me have been so egregious, and so grossly unfair. I think that makes that almost impossible. That didn't come from my side, it came from.
Okay, well,
Second,
whatever. It sounds like you're not willing to meet with each other to try to resolve your differences.
Well, it just explains the reason why.
Well, I know that, but that's why mediators work, because people are so angry that they don't want to ever talk to each other again.
I'm not a public official, and I've been slandered publicly on a video. That's a very serious thing.
You both are very angry about a lot of things that the others have done, so I'm just asking. I'm just asking, and it sounds like the answer is no. Okay.
Yeah, we need to pull it back into focus on the issue at hand. Yeah, we can only fix the problem that's in front of us, not outside issues. Any other questions for the owners, complainants, zoning administrator, village attorney? Okay. We'll move on to item 8, which is deliberation. Board members discuss the case, findings, recommendations, consideration of the zoning regulations, impact on neighboring properties, and community concerns. Would anybody like to start?
I'm with Laura on this. I think the site plan failed to include this interpretation. I think this is what you're saying, failed to include the use of the food truck. And that's how
I think as a member of the planning commission who reviewed the site plan, there may have always been an intention of having multi-use in the space, but we didn't hear that, at least I didn't hear that, and I didn't see it on the site plan. We did put some restrictions on the approval. And we might very well have approved having the food truck there. And I think it's an asset to the village, but I don't think it was in the approved site plan, and I can't support it staying there without an amended site plan.
So another issue is I do think that the citation that was issued based on Article 5 doesn't apply, because I don't believe that Article 5 per se applies. I want to take the point about the site plan.
I think that was something too, to your point, Barb, is that, when it says occupants, employees, and patrons, I don't know that the food truck is any of those three. Laura?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the issues is that the zoning is been under revision for a number of years. When it was written, food trucks were not something that was necessarily considered. And what we're being asked is to interpret if it should apply to it or not. And to me, it seems with what we do have, that it is a vehicle and it is parked there. But I do believe, you know, you did have a valid point also that if it's the primary use of that space, and if it is only, I mean, 83 days is not 365. When I was reading it prior, my understanding and thought on that is that the primary use is that it's a restaurant and that is the kitchen. But I do think that if it is meant to be interpreted as the primary use of that space is not going to be that the primary amount of time throughout the year. Correct? It's, I mean, you're saying now that it's 83, but I mean, I absolutely think that it is an issue of the fact that it wasn't in there, and the avenue that you've gone now, I am with what you're saying, like, does Article 5 and what was cited as the violation apply, or is it something else?
Violation of the site plan.
Right, versus a violation of Article 5. And I'm not sure what we're supposed to do in this situation if that's what we're looking at. Like, are they one and the same, Ross? I mean, how do we look at if we disagree with what the violation is citing?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
if the wrong thing has been cited.
I think in that instance, I think you would basically want to provide your interpretation that the ordinance is not the only portion of what you would call local rules and regulations that apply to the property, and that therefore the basis of the zoning violation should have also included or should have included something different. In that instance, then you would direct the zoning administrator to potentially withdraw the notice of zoning violation. You could then determine whether you want to direct her to reissue a different violation on the other basis, or you could decide that you only want to do that after 90 days, that give them some sort of temporary period in which to submit some sort of reapplication and then start that process. And once that process is started, then you don't have a need to issue a second violation because they've initiated the proper process
To correct it.
that you described. So that's one avenue.
Yeah.
That's one avenue.
Okay. Joni didn't hear any of that, though, I don't think.
I'll get it in the recording.
So what I was asking.
Right before you get right,
Yep.
could you just go over that last part again? There was sort of three things you talked about there, I think. The last.
The first option is we can just ask her to withdraw.
Okay. Yep.
Or we could ask her to amend the violation, or we could ask her to withdraw and within 90 days ask the property owners to come back with revised site plan.
Okay.
If I get that summarized.
Or expanded
basically
use or
not-
variance, depending on which they determine.
Okay.
Oh, I like number 3,
Mhm.
but, man, so the site plan would go to the planning commission.
Yep,
Right.
if that's what they filed. If they
Yeah.
filed a variance, it would come to us, and if it was expanded use,
Yeah, I got
it would
it,
come to
I got
us.
it. I still strongly believe that the concerns of Patrick and Kay should be addressed somehow.
They would be if any of those 3 processes have public time as well. Like, if you have to
Right,
do a site plan
yeah.
review, there's public review and time for asking questions before it is approved, the new use.
Right, I understand
If you-
that,
yeah.
but I would caution Kevin and Sean to take some of take their concerns into consideration. Not that I don't think they're entirely against, I don't want to speak for them. But that's why it would be so good to talk to each other, to really understand what
It's not
the
going
issues
to
are.
happen.
But not gonna happen, that's too bad. All right, so Is it time for a motion of some kind?
Sure.
Okay, I make a motion that we direct the zoning administrator to withdraw the violation and instruct the property owners in question at 215 Mill Street to within 90 days submit a site plan review, variance, or expanded use to address all of the uses that you're going to perform or have at your location, so that that can be reviewed by the proper body and handled.
Okay, it was moved by Laura, supported by Jane, that we instruct the zoning administrator to withdraw her request and ask the parties at 215 to submit for a variance, a expanded use, or a revised site plan. Is there any discussion about this?
I think it's the best way to solve the problem.
Well, and I think if we don't meet, if that 90 days isn't met, then I think we would need to look at a violation
A
on,
different violation.
yes, correct. If that makes
It
sense.
feels a little like kicking the can down the road.
Well, I don't think we can.
Since the same issues are going to come up.
But it's it's the process, and it's the question about what the violation is, and that it doesn't quite apply here, or there's not enough clarity to apply it here in this instance. That's my
We'll
feeling
have
on
a
it
new
right
zoning
now.
administrator by then.
Jim has been aware of this though. He's communicated with our current ZA because he's taking over. I checked with that, just because I wanted to be sure that he wasn't going to be coming in here and not understanding what's happening.
Okay, any other further discussion? Okay, so roll call?
Sure.
Yes. So we'll do a roll call vote with the motion on the table, starting with Susan.
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Hugh.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes.
Barb.
Yes.
And yes. Motion passes. And we will move to adjournment.
So moved.
You have a second public comment? You should.
There is no second public comment on the agenda, so we'll move for adjournment at 2:10.
It was roundabout, but I think you did a good job.
No, they're redoing it. That's not what it was.
I realize that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris, do you need copies of these, or?
Let's see, what do you have there? I mean, you gave us copies of some things.
Thanks for your work on this too. Of course not.
You know, for me, it's always been a help.
Well, they're not, yeah, I gave her.
When I saw all that.
Yeah,
And that fence and plants gone.
no, it was not.
It was like,
Surgery?
was never about all this personal stuff, I don't know why. You want these? I got this one, I think you got it, I think everybody got this one.
Yes, give me that, I like it.
And then, I got one. Here's the wireless.
There we go.
No.
That's how thick that had.
I don't want to get caught.
So, you did.